What's up guys, Mike from Rockville, and today we are looking at how to set up your soundbar with your TV and what to do if you don't hear any sound coming out of it. Let's get to it. So let's start with some setups. The first setup we're going to talk about is an optical setup. This is where you need to know a little bit about your TV, because a general rule of thumb is that TVs that are 2007 or older do not use optical as a form of audio outputting. But if your TV is 2008 or newer, in most cases you can use the optical as a form of audio outputting through the soundbar. You just have to check the specs on your TV. Optical setups are super easy. You just take an optical cable, plug one end into the TV, it'll illuminate on the tip, and you take the other end and plug it directly into your soundbar. And then you just make sure that the input source on your soundbar is in optical mode and you're good to go. The next setup is an HDMI setup. This is very similar to our optical setup, but instead of an optical cable, we're now using an HDMI cable. But now on your TV, you need to make sure you have an HDMI ARC port for the HDMI cable. ARC stands for Audio Return Channel, and this HDMI port is different from a normal HDMI port. Normally an HDMI port is used to input something onto the screen, but if you have an HDMI ARC port, that allows the TV to send audio out into something like a soundbar. So if you hook up your soundbar with an HDMI cable going into the HDMI port on a TV and you're not hearing any sound, it might be because you're not plugged into an ARC port. So just check the specs on your TV to make sure you have an HDMI ARC port to use as audio output. And just like we did when we were setting up through optical, when you're setting up through HDMI ARC, you might need to go into your TV settings and change the audio settings so that it's outputting not from your TV speakers, but through audio output. And also like we did when we were in optical, you might need to set it to PCM or Bitstream depending on your sound source. Now the next setup is the RCA or aux setup. This is basically one of the most basic analog setups that you can get to get sound from your TV to your soundbar. It's also one of the more outdated ones, as increasingly new TVs are not including this RCA output. So you're going to use an RCA to RCA cable or an RCA to aux cable. This end is going to go into the TV. The red and white RCA outputs on your TV that should be labeled audio outputs, and the other end is going to go into your soundbar. In the case of the One-Bar like I have in front of me, there is no RCA inputs. You would put the RCA end into the TV and then the 3.5 millimeter end into the aux input on the One-Bar. And then the only thing I would need to make sure to remember is to set the One-Bar to aux mode. Now the keyword in all of that was the audio output RCAs, because some TVs might have other RCA jacks or ports, and you just want to make sure that they're specifically for audio outputting. Because some TVs have the red, white, and yellow RCA jacks. Those are usually inputs to get video and sound from something like a DVD player or a Blu-ray player into the TV. But what we need is audio outputting from the TV through those RCAs into something like a soundbar. Now some TVs might not have this red and white RCA audio output, but they'll have a headphone output. You can actually, in some cases, use the headphone output jack to connect to your soundbar. All you would need is a 3.5 millimeter aux cable. So this end would go right into the headphone jack on the TV, and the other end would go right into the aux input on your One-Bar or other soundbar. But this again only works if your TV has a designated headphone jack. But before we move on, we need to talk about your TV settings. Some TVs require you to go into the sound settings of the TV and change the audio outputting from TV speakers to audio output. This is basically telling the TV to send the sound to the soundbar instead of to the TV speakers. But there are some cases where if you don't change this setting, you're not going to hear any sound through your soundbar. Another thing you might have to change in the audio settings of your TV is what mode your TV is audio outputting, either PCM or Bitstream. That might sound a little confusing or technical, but in simplest terms, PCM just means that the TV is able to output stereo signal through the optical cable into the soundbar. And Bitstream is a mode in which it allows your TV to send complex surround sound audio information like 5.1, 7.1, Dolby, other audio formats over optical into your soundbar. This is super important to know because if you don't have PCM or Bitstream selected, depending on what you're watching and how you're watching, you're not going to hear any audio through your soundbar. Now with everyone watching content from apps like Netflix, Hulu, Disney+, most of the content on those apps are mixed in stereo, so they'll work over PCM, but there are a few shows and movies that are mixed in higher formats like 5.1 and other different Dolby experiences. So depending on what you're watching, watching and what app you're watching, you need to make sure that you are lined up all throughout the chain in either PCM or Bitstream. Otherwise, you might not hear anything coming through your soundbar. So these are 3 common setups that you're most likely going to use when you're setting up a soundbar with a TV. And hopefully with the other tips that we covered, you'll be able to troubleshoot if you don't hear any sound coming through your soundbar. But of course, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to us through phone or email. As always, guys, I'm Mike from Rockville. I'll see you next time.